Tanks are known for their power and might, or at least that's the expectation. However, there are instances when unsuccessful projects end up in mass production. Military experts rank the world's best tanks, but where there's a best, there's also a worst. These experts continuously assess the armies of different nations, pinpointing the weakest and most outdated tanks, which are better suited for the scrapyard than the battlefield. In their current rankings, you'll find both contemporary and historical models. So, let's explore the darkest corners of tank manufacturing and uncover the absolute worst it has to offer. Subscribe to our channel and let's get started. T-80. Design flaws have turned this tank into a mobile crematorium on tracks. The T-80 is a vivid example of how heavily armored tanks can also be incredibly vulnerable. Previously highly regarded in Russian military circles, the T-80 faced a series of embarrassing losses to less equipped Chechen forces during the First Chechen War. Another major issue with the T-80, like all previous Russian tanks, is its gun's limited ability to aim upwards or downwards. This means the tank struggles to effectively target enemies firing from high positions or from underground. The main problem wasn't just the tank itself, but also the insufficient training of Russian tank crews and a flawed tactical strategy. T-72. American experts have labeled the Soviet T-72 Ural as morally outdated for contemporary combat. Their evaluation relied on data from the Desert Storm operation. Beyond examining its defensive capabilities, they found the T-72 lacking in combat strength. During the 1990s Persian Gulf offensive, Iraq's tanks were mostly incapacitated within days, while Allies experienced minimal losses. Leopard II. The German Leopard II, despite being a more recent development, has faced significant challenges. The Leopard is a large tank, which makes it harder to hide compared to Soviet-designed machines. However, its vulnerabilities are even more troubling. One notable weakness is the Leopard's larger gun mantlet. Although a hit to this area might not be fatal, it does render the tank weaponless. There are also concerns about the ammunition used in these modern tanks. They rely on electric firing mechanisms, and if there's an electronic failure, the tank loses its ability to fire. Similar electrical dependencies affect the stabilizer and turret rotation. In Syria, rebel groups sent columns of Leopards to the scrapyard armed only with basic weapons and rocket-propelled grenades. FCM-2C. This French super-heavy tank was designed towards the end of World War I but didn't see any action during that conflict. By the time World War II began, this tank had become hopelessly outdated. Originally intended as a breakthrough tank, a large, heavy machine that would advance slowly through enemy lines. The FCM-2C's slow speed made it an easy target for enemy artillery in the context of World War II. Panzer 68. In 1968, Swiss designers unveiled their latest creation, the Panzer 68. This tank was supposed to replace the British Centurion tank fleet entirely and serve as reliable protection against Soviet invasion. However, Panzer 68 was utterly non-competitive. Despite its quality construction, the tank had numerous design flaws. The claimed protection against mass destruction weapons didn't work, forcing tank crews to wear protective suits. Transmission quirks allowed for shifting to reverse gear only after coming to a complete stop, costing precious seconds. Moreover, when using the radio, the tank turret would unpredictably start turning, requiring communication to be turned off during drills. And trying to activate the heater would trigger the gun's electrical firing mechanism. M3. Now let's focus on an American medium tank developed in 1940. This machine boasted substantial firepower, featuring 75mm and 37mm guns, along with four 7.62mm machine guns. However, the emphasis on heavy weaponry came at the cost of effective armor. It was heavy and unwieldy, with a top speed of just 18 miles per hour, but the main issue with the M3 was the location of its 75mm gun. It was positioned directly in the tank's hull, permanently facing forward. To fire the most potent gun, the tank had to rotate its entire body. T-35. Another multi-gun tank, this one from the USSR. The T35 was equipped with a 75mm gun, two 45mm guns, and 5 machine guns. Like the M3, this impressive firepower compromised its armor and maneuverability. However, unlike the M3, which saw action during World War II, most T-35 tanks were in disrepair at the start of the war and ended up in German hands when Kiev was captured. The few T-35s that did face the enemy were quickly destroyed due to their armor deficiencies. Arjun. In 1972, Indian experts began developing a future tank to replace the aging T-55 and compete with the modern Soviet T-72 as India's primary battle tank. However, the decision to start tank production didn't come until 1996, leading to a project revamp to adapt to the new circumstances. By then, development costs had already reached $193 million. In reality, things went quite differently. The tank's reliability was poor. Its suspension couldn't handle the 58-ton machine, and the quality of Indian-made components left much to be desired. Additionally, the tank's power-to-weight ratio was only 22 horsepower per ton, making it unsuitable for use in Punjab and northern regions of India. T26. This Soviet light tank served as the core of the USSR's tank forces at the beginning of the Great Patriotic War. Production of these tanks began in 1931. They were equipped with either a 45mm gun and a machine gun or just 2 machine guns. The armor was dubious at best. The turret's frontal armor measured 25mm in thickness, while the front of the hull had a mere 16mm of armor, and the sides featured a paltry 10 to 11mm thickness. Such unreliable protection meant that the T-26 could be penetrated by machine gun fire, not to mention tank shells. Production of these tanks was halted shortly after the war began, as they proved entirely unsuitable for combat. T1. German light tanks. T1 were the main German armored vehicles at the outset of World War II, even though production had stopped shortly before. These tanks had already proven their inadequacy during the Spanish Civil War. Thin armor and weak armament all contributed to making the T1 one of the worst tanks of its era. M551. In 1963, the United States began testing a new airborne tank with the aim of replacing lightweight vehicles and boosting the firepower of American paratroopers. Designed for its intended purpose, the tank weighed in at a relatively light 15 tons and boasted significant armament, featuring a 152mm gun launcher capable of dealing with enemy armored vehicles. However, when the M551 was deployed to Vietnam, General Westmoreland famously referred to the machine as a $300,000 machine gun nest. Firstly, the tank was ill-suited for conventional combat. Its aluminum-magnesium alloy armor, known as 7039, not only provided inadequate protection, but was also hazardous to the crew due to its propensity to quickly catch fire after impacts. Firing standard ammunition caused the tank to bounce, damaging its components and leading to crew injuries. The smoothbore 152mm gun rounds left residue in the barrel, while their low-density feeling resulted in a buildup of flammable vapors in the fighting compartment. That's all for today. Write in the comments which tank you consider the worst. And if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any exciting content on weapons and military technology.